On the day it happened, I was not expecting to hear the voice of God. Here's why. First of all, I don't believe in a God who has a voice. Second, as I was walking down the street at 4 a.m. on my way to an all-night reading of the names of Holocaust victims, the encounter with the divine was the farthest thing from my mind. You see, I was angry. I did not want to be up at 4 a.m. on my way to this ritual. This ritual I didn't think really had a lot of meaning. Who cares if I show up at 4 a.m. to a mostly empty room of people and read names? And as I showed up into that sanctuary, I felt a swell of self-righteousness. I looked around, and there was almost no one there. It's like, I knew it. I'm going to be here because of my sense of obligation to the community and nothing else. And so I sat down in the corner in an empty pew and half fell asleep listening to the drone of names in the background. When my turn came to read, I went up to the podium and was handed a sheaf of paper. And when I looked down at that paper, my stomach dropped. On that paper was a list of Schwartzes, my family name. I read through them, reading victims that had the same names as my cousins, as my aunts and uncles, as my siblings, until I got to my own name, written twice. Charles Schwartz, age 44, born 1900, murdered 1944. Charles Schwartz, age 6, born 1936, murdered in Auschwitz 1942. When I read those names, the enormity of the Holocaust felt real to me in a way it never had before. The pain and the trauma felt tangible. What happened next I didn't expect. I felt a sense of transcendence. I felt a sense of connection. I felt a sense of God's presence, as if it was God's voice calling those names through my voice. And as I thought more about that moment, I realized I also felt a deep sense of irony, even humor. Because one of the reasons that I don't believe in a God with a voice, that I don't believe in a God who acts in history, a God who cares about me so much that would put me in that position to read my own name, is if a God cares that much about me, what about Charles Schwartz, age 6, born 1936, murdered in Auschwitz, 1942? If I believe of a God outside of history, then it's ultimately not God's responsibility that there's evil in the world. It's ours. It's humanity's. But on the other hand, if I believe in that personal God, the God I was experiencing in that moment, and I believe that we're truly made in B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, then of course, God's going to be a little bit funny. God's going to be humorous. Maybe even a little crass. And that God would certainly know the power of irony to teach a deep, deep lesson. And there I was at that podium, experiencing the tension between the God I believed in and the God I was feeling. And in that moment, torn between those two visions, I felt alive. I felt awake. I was able to pay attention in a way different to the wonder and mystery that surrounds us. Now, that act of paying attention, of looking into the banality that consumes our lives and seeing the wonder that surrounds us, that's getting harder and harder to do. With the rise of digital communication, social media, we have more and more tools to distract us. There's a researcher who once found out that on average we're distracted about every 11 minutes from our work. And if you're anything like me, that seems like a little bit of an understatement. My general workflow has G-chats and Twitter and Facebook and email and documents, all in the service of the work I'm actually doing. It's getting harder and harder to pay attention. What's more is our attention is actually commodified now. People pay money for it. There are businesses out there who try and make apps or ads or websites that draw our attention away from the things that really matter. Now, it's easy to say that this is all because of the social media revolution, the digital revolution, but if you look back at our texts, we as Jews have always struggled paying attention. Take the story of Abraham and the binding of Isaac. Just as Abraham is about to sacrifice his son, doing what he thinks is God's will, the angel calls out his name, Abraham, Abraham, twice. Why twice? He didn't hear the first time. He wasn't paying attention. When Yaakov sees the vision of the angels going up and down the ladder, when he arises from that vision, he wakes up and says, Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. God is in this place and I didn't know. I wasn't paying attention. And when Moshe sees the burning bush, he understands that there's something wondrous going on, but it's not until God calls his name twice, Moshe, Moshe, that he realizes that it's the divine, that it's God. Now, Louis Pasteur is quoted as saying that chance favors the prepared mind. And if that's true with science, I think that's true with religion, and it's true with God. That these encounters with the holy, with the divine, only favor the prepared mind, the mind that's ready to pay attention. One of the great gifts that Judaism has given us is that it trains us to pay attention through ritual, through prayer, through the way it brings us in contact with each other and the world around us, through community, through those times when it makes us get up at 4 a.m. to go to a ritual that we think has no value. Now, as I stood there at that podium and I felt that tension between the God of history and the personal God, and the God who cannot be a part of history, nothing was resolved for me. I had no clairvoyant revelation of what exactly I was supposed to believe. But what I did learn in that moment was the power of attention, of paying attention to the wonder around us. And when we pay attention, we can begin to hear God's voice calling our name in our own voices and in the world. Thank you.
And in writing poetry, I'm able to thank God by acknowledging that he has planted certain needs within me, the need to clarify and codify, reveal and release. When I'm confused, writing poetry allows me to strip down my thoughts, to buff and polish them until they are so shiny I can see my reflection in them. And this helps, especially when there are hard truths to accept. Among these, that God has created a world in which parents cannot protect their children.